how did the show come about? Because I know you weren't really on the first season, and then you teamed up with John, and then how
Yeah,
did
kind of,
that?
sort of. I wanted no part of the first season, if I'm
Okay.
being honest with you. So when I came to the agency, I was at a crossroads in my career where I was at, and I knew that I was going to kind of transition out of my old brokerage and go find a new home. And that's when the conversations with John kind of started. So ultimately, I think I would have ended up at the agency anyways. But partnering with John made that transition really
Mm-hmm.
easy. And I think about 3 or 4 months after I got there, around 2021, we were notified that the agency was going to be filming a reality show based around Mauricio and his family and the brokerage itself. And this was like right at the height of selling Sunset. And I've known Jason for a long time, and he's actually a good buddy. But when it comes to that show, obviously it's highly dramatized
Yeah.
and there's a lot of conflict. And just, as a professional and the way I saw myself, that really wasn't something I wanted to be a part of. And without understanding what the context of buying Beverly Hills was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
I very politely declined.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Stamie and sometimes Tracy show. Today, I have a really special guest, motivated me to get my butt back in the podcast chair. And today, I have my very good friend, Adam Rosenfeld, here. You may know him from Buying Beverly Hills season 1 and 2, mostly season 2. And I would say he definitely popped off the screen this season. And I'm very lucky to have him here. Hello, Adam.
What up, Stamie? How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Feeling good. I'm sitting at home right now, still in the recovery process, but I'm feeling way better, and it's exciting to kind of get back to life.
Yeah, so you just had your back surgery, so you were out for a few weeks,
Yeah.
um, and you're feeling good. You're not in pain anymore, right?
Nope. I'm sore, but in comparison to what I used to feel, this is a very welcome change of pace. And unfortunately, this is my third surgery, but after 20 years of chronic pain, it's pretty exciting to not feel those things and to think about all the things I'm going to be able to do again that I haven't been able to do for a really long period of time. Like the little things you take for granted, like just going for a walk and being able to do that without having to sit down
Oh, I
every
guess
5 to 10 minutes.
you never really think about that. Yeah, I mean, you play golf, so did you just play through your pain?
Yeah, I would. I guess when you're fanatical about anything, you find a way. But if I wasn't like riding in a cart, there's no way. Like I couldn't walk
Oh,
a golf
got it.
course, not possible. So when I play, I'll like lay down in between holes and have someone else drive the cart and just kind of cruise.
That's amazing. And now you're back in the saddle. I'm with the agency now. I switched over to the company. I joined the GRG group. It's been great. I've been here since
Best thing that ever happened
January.
to me.
It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I really enjoy working with you. You're really awesome. It's cool to like know of agents and then to meet. I met you and John, and you guys have been really great. And you know, the two of you together, you definitely have like the synergy that is really awesome to see, and it's rare.
Hmm.
And you're really cool guys. So like you're like full throttle. Like every day you're doing your thing. You have appointments. You're like, I mean, I call the both of you rainmakers because like it just happens for you. Uh, I I would say, what is the longest time? You've been an agent for how long now?
So let's see, it's 2024. I moved to LA in 2012, which was, I guess, 12 years ago. It'll
Yeah.
be my 12-year anniversary here June 1st, so coming up.
Oh
And I
wow.
got licensed pretty quickly. So I guess I'm also going on 12 years in this business.
Wow. And you also went to law school?
I did. Ironically, the only reason I think I am in real estate and practicing is because I have that degree, which seemingly has no connection. But at the time in 2012, when I decided to get licensed, I really did it not thinking it was going to be a career or profession. I did it because I was in transition in life, and my brother was just starting to kind of cut his teeth as a builder. And he took on his first project and basically said to me, if you get licensed, you can sell it. And I think it was meant to be like $1.5 million resale, which
Wow.
was like $30,000 in commission at the time. And that was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. So
And that was a
I
great
had
motivator. Yeah.
it was a great motivator. And the reason I mentioned law school is at the time, because I had that degree, the way the rules are written is with that degree, you didn't have to go through any of the coursework. I could just
Right.
sit and take the exam.
Right.
had I had to sit through those courses, I don't think I would have done it. So the one good thing the law degree did for me was bring me to my career. And 12 years
There's
later,
a
here I am.
silver lining to everything. See, if you go to law school, you can get your real estate license
Yeah.
really easy, you guys. So, yeah, I find it, what I find fascinating about like a lot of realtors is like, you don't necessarily, I mean, maybe now with the reality shows, but before, like, you don't like plan to be a real estate agent. And then someone says something to you and the light bulb goes off into your, in your head. Like, that's how I started. I was doing stand up and I was like, what else can I do? And then I was at a bar one night. My friend's like, get your license. You can be an agent with me. And then I went home and signed up that night.
Yeah.
And then it happened pretty quickly. Yeah.
I still struggle with the idea that this is my life and this is what I do as a profession. And I think ultimately the stigma that comes with this field is a real one and it's
Mm-hmm.
tangible. And unfortunately, I felt it too. It's not an
Yeah.
industry or career that I had a lot of respect for coming into it. And it wasn't until I really got into it and then started to dive in and really understand the great challenges that come with doing this on a day to day and being productive with it and actually treating it like a profession and a career and really learning the responsibility that comes with it. You're ultimately handling the largest investment slash
Right.
transaction that your
Yeah.
clients are ever going to have in their entire lives. And to think that the barrier to entry into this profession is so low still astounds me because everybody knows somebody or a handful of people that are licensed. And just because you sit and take a test doesn't necessarily mean you're qualified to handle these types of transaction slash investment scenarios. And there's a real, kind of fine tooth nuance that goes into understanding how to do this job and do it well and do it effectively. And, ultimately not fall into the trap of being a part of the stigma, and
Right.
being, one of the few who actually goes about their business in a professional way and really gives the business
Yeah.
the proper, true, good reputation that it really, truly does deserve.
Yeah. It's very, you got to be able to finesse a deal. And then and it does get such a bad rap, real estate. And I know there's like a handful of agents and then like I posted a video and then someone was like, "You're the most despicable career under like the oil salesman." And I'm like, "What do you
Yeah.
like? How do we even make someone buy a house? You can't make someone buy a $2 million house or whatever. If anything, we can motivate you to buy a property because it's like your future depends on it. But and there are some shady characters, but you got to do your due diligence when you hire an agent. Like you got to look at what they've sold. Do they own a property? Have they ever owned a property? And I think a lot of people walk into it without asking questions. Then they get stuck with an agent, and then they can't be like, "Oh, this isn't working out. I'm going to get another agent." They just do the transaction, and then they hate everything after the transaction. And
Yeah.
but yeah,
I guess I look at it differently. I don't think of it as sales. I know there's obviously this label that comes with being
it's
in the
not.
brokerage
Yep.
business. They call you a salesperson.
Right.
I'm not selling anything other than, I guess, myself and the services I provide. Um, it's different. The business is different now. It used to be that agents were the gatekeepers of all these properties before we had things like Zillow and Redfin.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was really just on the MLS that agents had access to, and I think a lot of the consumers or clients thought, well, finding deal is half the battle. Finding the deal is half the battle, and it's not the case anymore because every
Nope.
consumer goes online and looks at these websites religiously. It's not hard to find a property that checks a lot of boxes today. It's the agent's job to really steward the process and truly be an advisor and act as a fiduciary. And a simple analogy for this, me just playing golf is I think of myself as like a caddy. The client is ultimately the one swinging the club and making the decisions. It's really on me to know the course, obviously understand the fundamentals, and then provide advice. And whether or not the client chooses to use that advice is totally up to them. I'm really just kind of a safety net and a stopgap. And I take that responsibility really seriously. And ultimately, I think it leads to, better understanding of people and this business and just the long-term perspective of no one deal is going to make or break somebody's career, and it becomes really easy to look at a deal and count the commission before the deal closes, and in doing so you're inherently doing a disservice to the client. So I try to stay very outcome independent on every deal that I do the deal to the best of my ability, and whether it closes or not, ultimately sometimes it's outside of my control. And I know it
Yep.
sounds crazy, but I don't care. I care on behalf of the
Yep.
client and what their objective is, but for me, it doesn't matter. I'm looking at a long-term time horizon. And I know if I do a good job by the client, I'm going to have that business for the next 20 years of my career, as opposed
Right.
to just doing one transaction everything burning to the ground. And yeah, maybe I made some money, but that client will never talk to
No,
me
I think
again.
I think
So
like any career, if you focus on the money, you're dead in the water. I mean, and if you
totally
think about your commission, you're jinxing your like I don't even count my commission till
happens every time, right?
you cannot even look at the number when people are like, "What's your commission?" I'm like, "I don't know," and I'm not counting until almost the end of my deal because it always jinxes it. And yeah, you have a duty to your to the person you're working with. You know, you're
Hmm.
building a relationship, and it isn't a relationship, but you also have to have like a, in my opinion, a cool personality because you're also working with another agent. So you got to manage the other agent, get along with the other agent, and give advice on the. I mean, there's so it's so layered, and I think it's all going to come to the surface now with the new commission structure. You know that we're going to have to
Yeah.
discuss like what we do as a buyer's agent. um, but it is a great profession, and you and John have created like a really cool team, you know, because you guys still have fun. Like, and how do you handle the volume? Like, because you guys are pretty run around all the time. How do you decompress when you get
It's
home?
hard. Every day is different. So, obviously being busy is a blessing, and we are very fortunate in that we have a very productive business. It wasn't always like that for either of us. We both started essentially at the bottom, just like anyone does when they get into a new industry. And I think for me, it was increasingly difficult because this is not my home market. I wasn't born and raised here, so I
Right.
didn't have those friendships and family relationships. And you have to figure out a way to really create a niche and understand that there's working hard and working smart. And, I think the best kind of have a tendency to do
Mm-hmm.
both. And once you figure out, where your lane is, then you ultimately start building some momentum. And when John and I linked together, it was a long process. We really poked a lot of holes in it. Ultimately, I'll speak for myself. One of the best decisions I ever made in my entire life, and not just in my career, but genuinely in my life, because a partnership is very much like a marriage, and you see how quickly marriages fail. I think John and I both have a very similar ethos and mindset in terms of the way we go about doing what we do. Slightly different skill sets, but we complement each other really well. And the biggest blessing in it is that he's become arguably one of my best friends in the
Of
whole
course,
world.
yeah.
We've never had an argument, let alone a fight. And there's so much
Is
mutual
it because
reverence
you
and
can beat them
respect.
up if you guys got in a fight? Is that why?
No, it's definitely not the case. I think it's just the fact that we have so much mutual respect for each other that if somebody feels so strongly about one thing versus the other, we are very quick to just say, no problem, we'll do it your way.
Right.
I think it's been very second nature for both of us to kind of check ego at the door. And, we know that when we're dealing with one another, and to your point, agents on the other side of the
Right.
transaction, it's all meant to be respect. I think one of the biggest misnomers of the business is the fact that, I think the TV shows are potentially the biggest issue when it comes to this stuff. Ironically, is you see two agents on a screen basically yelling at each other, screaming at each other,
Mm-hmm.
making it an adversarial type of situation, and then they pick up the phone and they're negotiating and hashing it out, and ultimately they close a deal and they make $700,000 and like case closed, and they move on to the next one. And that's not the way the business is conducted. I think the best agents not only have great relationships within the community, but also amongst their peers. Half of what we do is kind of being a private investigator and a sleuth and having to figure things out and find properties and problem solve and put out fires. And the only real effective way to do that is if you have somebody on the other side of the transaction that you have a great
Mm-hmm.
relationship with, because ultimately you have the same objective, which is getting the deal closed. Obviously want to advocate on behalf of your client and they on theirs, but the best deals are the deals where both parties feel like they won and it works
Right.
out in everyone's
Yep.
best interests.
And then you could sleep at night too. I mean, you can go home and feel like good about yourself, like
And
you
I,
did your job.
I,
Yeah.
I sleep like a baby. I'd say there's no better sleeping pill than peace of mind. And when you do your job right and effectively, and that to whatever degree, obviously we're not surgeons or rocket scientists, but
Right.
you're doing something additive to provide value to somebody else, and that's always a good feeling, regardless of what your field is.
How did the show come about? Because I know you weren't really on the first season, and then you teamed up with John, and then how
Yeah,
did
kind of,
that?
sort of. I wanted no part of the first season, if I'm
Okay.
being honest with you. So when I came to the agency, I was at a crossroads in my career where I was at, and I knew that I was going to kind of transition out of my old brokerage and go find a new home. And that's when the conversations with John kind of started. So ultimately, I think I would have ended up at the agency anyways. But partnering with John made that transition really
Mm-hmm.
easy. And I think about 3 or 4 months after I got there, around 2021, we were notified that the agency was going to be filming a reality show based around Mauricio and his family and the brokerage itself. And this was like right at the height of Selling Sunset. And I've known Jason for a long time, and he's actually a good buddy. But when it comes to that show, obviously it's highly dramatized,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of conflict. And just as a professional and the way I saw myself, that really wasn't something I wanted to be a part of. And without understanding what the context of buying Beverly Hills was going to be, I very politely declined. John was cast, and I kind of showed face in a couple scenes, just for some support and to be a bit of a
Right.
background
Oh, got
character.
it. Got it. Yeah.
But after seeing that season and what it actually was, which was much more real estate forward, I felt a lot better about it the second time around when they came calling again, asking if I was interested, and had that conversation with John and thought about it for a couple of days, and ultimately decided to do it and had a blast with it. It was so much fun
Yeah,
to do.
it definitely showed on screen that you guys had a lot of fun with the guys, and um, I love the daughters. Obviously, you already are in a wonderful relationship, so them trying to hook you up with Mauricio's daughter. I mean, that's one question everyone's like, is Adam single? And I mean, you can answer that
Well,
question.
at the time of filming, I was, but that was over a year ago, and obviously things change in life, and
Right.
I've been very fortunate to find an amazing partner in person who I've started sharing my life with. She's fantastic, and I've known her
She
for
is. Yep.
18 years. So like there's a real comfort there, and all I can really say about it is love is dope.
Love is
It's not
dope.
it's dope. It's been cool. I've been obviously in lots of relationships in my life, and have a lot of great ex-partners and just beautiful people that I've been able to interact with, and relationships that are still meaningful to me. I've been fortunate enough to maintain and cement friendships, even from people in my past. But sometimes you just find someone and like it feels right, and you
Right.
just kind of know that you're on the right path. And I feel
That's
like
amazing. Yeah.
that's where I'm at now. Yeah.
Well, you guys are both awesome. Shout out to Nikki. What's up, Nikki?
Thank you.
Yes. Selling Sunset. I mean, everyone would come up to me at parties and like, you're in real estate. Do you watch Selling Sunset? I'm like, no, I can't even I can't put up with that fake drama. It's very like dramatized and not realistic. And a lot of,
You might not know this. I was on an episode of Selling Sunset in season
no,
one.
I did not know that. Which episode
I
is that,
was.
Adam?
I was. It was the very last episode of season one, and this was completely organic. I had no idea what
A
I was walking
showing?
into. No, I got a call from Jason or a text. I can't remember at the time, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm having a pool party at my house in Rising Glen. I'd love for you to come and hang." And I was like, "All right, cool." It was summertime. He had a nice pool there, so I drive up, and there's this huge like production going on. And I'm like, "What the fuck is all this?" And he started explaining to me. He's like, "Oh, we're actually doing this TV show." And they mic'd me up, and I was kind of terrified because I didn't know what was happening around me, and I was just kind of in the background when they were
Right.
doing one of these scenes at the pool. So it was funny to go back and watch.
And then what did you have a favorite scene in this season or?
I don't know if there was one scene, but definitely Miami for me was the pinnacle, and
Yeah,
that
that looked pretty
was
cool.
a little personal, just because that's my hometown. So it was an opportunity to go back with the cast and my coworkers and my peers and contemporaries, and be back home, which is kind of coming
Right.
full circle, and that felt special to me. And we had just such a great time down there. It was genuinely a blast. They're a great group, and anyone who knows the agency and the agency culture, at least out here in Los Angeles, it kind of gets a rap sometimes for being like a fraternity, but it really is very family oriented. And I guess to a certain degree, it is a fraternity. It's very fraternal in that, people genuinely care about each other and spend time together and hang out together. And that cast over, the course of the 4 or 5 months we were filming really started to feel like family. And I look back on all the things that have transpired in my life
Mm-hmm.
to get to where I am today, and to the place that I call home at work, which is the agency, and couldn't be more grateful. They've really created an amazing foundation for people like me to do good business, and I'm super grateful to be there.
Yeah, I mean, Mauricio's a lovely guy, and I've
He
met
really
him.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he sparkles like he's a really cool guy, and yeah, and I mean, he just has that charm
Yeah.
that permeates out of him. But do you think you said fraternal? So do you like? Does it feel like a boys' club sometime, or do you feel like I don't pick that up? I'm just saying, like, do you ever
Yeah,
feel?
It can. I mean, look, our industry is interesting in that I don't know that it is dominated by one sex or the other. You know,
Hmm.
there's a very strong representation of amazing female entrepreneurs and bosses in this industry.
Hmm.
And the agency is no exception to that. We certainly have some amazing, powerful women at the company. Just look at Mo's daughters and you'll see
Yeah,
exactly what I'm
exactly. Yep.
talking about. And when I say fraternity, I don't necessarily mean it as a boys' club. I mean that
Right.
inclusive of men and women. So call it a sorority or sorority or whatever you
Social
want to
club.
call it. But
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what it feels like. And it's just a group of people that genuinely care about one another, and obviously love to have fun together, but do good business together. And I think the work
Yeah.
life balance that exists in a culture like this is paramount to happiness. And I really think they've kind of nailed it. They figured it out and early on. And I think the thought process behind when it started, which is going back almost, I think, 12 years ago, was meant to be more like what you would see at an agency on the Hollywood side of business, in entertainment,
Hmm.
like a
Yeah,
UTA or CAA, where things are more collaborative amongst agents instead of it being this kind of every man for himself. I think they caught into something uniquely different a little bit early, and they were able to take that and run with it. And when you have personalities like Mauricio running the show, naturally it's going to be successful. The guy is so charismatic
yeah.
and
So
honestly
yeah,
such a nice guy. I think people know him from what they see on TV, which for me is kind of head scratching because I'd never seen Real Housewives or really understood the nature of his celebrity actually until we were in Miami together, and just being out in town and watching people just be so drawn to him like a magnet, and asking for a picture or an autograph everywhere we went. There it was, and everyone met him with tremendous praise and applause. And he just seems like, I guess, a guy that a lot of people can relate to, just in terms of the way he carries himself. And
for sure. Yeah.
he does business the same way. What you see is kind of what you get with Mo, and I have nothing but respect for him and what he's
That
been able to build.
that's what I loved about the season actually was that it showed that people do business with people they like. Like,
Hmm.
of course, you have to know your craft. You have to be experienced, but that's it represented that. Like all the clients like their agents. Mauricio had that charismatic quality before he was on TV. Like you just saw him and he just had this like little twinkle.
Yeah,
Like
I
his
guess it's
little
something you're born with, just like any
yeah,
other talent. I don't
yeah,
know that that's
exactly.
something that can be taught, but that's innate to who he is. And if there's one thing I try to take away from him, it's just the way he sees life and the way he tacks like every day with this crazy enthusiasm unknown to
Mm-hmm.
mankind. And
Yeah.
every interaction he has, you talk to him and you feel like you're the only person in the world because he gives you that true attention.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that coming from the guy at the very top is incredibly impactful, for senior agents and even for brand new agents trying to
For
cut their
sure.
teeth and make it in this industry.
For sure, for sure. Let me. So you're. I love your personality is always very cool and calm. Adam, what pisses you off? Because I love seeing like. I mean, I've seen you get spicy and like throw out some one liners, which I fucking love. What
Yeah.
really gets you? Like, what gets you going?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have a good answer. I tend to be pretty even. Maybe that's one of my strengths, but anger is not an emotion I'm super in touch with. I'll get frustrated just like anybody
Okay.
else, especially when I feel like someone's being taken advantage of, or there's obviously a disservice happening.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, just like anyone else, I get frustrated with stupidity. I get frustrated with ego. Agenting is hard, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
agents, especially when they're starting out, go about business a certain way, which is I'm going to cause a problem, so then I can go and solve the problem
Mm-hmm.
to show the client the value I added. Look what I did for you in solving this issue, which is an issue you created in the first place.
Right.
And that shit drives me nuts. Um, Even with that, I'm not the kind of guy that's ever going to yell and scream or raise my voice. And I think it's that much more impactful when I sit across from somebody,
Right.
in a negotiating room or having a, contentious confrontation, and I stay stoic all throughout that. And the words that, I speak tend to carry heavier weight when I'm not yelling and screaming and flailing, because those aren't qualities that I typically respect.
No.
And I
Right.
always try to model myself after people that have come before me and who I feel like have done it well. And ultimately, these are just choices we make. And, I guess part of it is inherent and just in terms of my nature and what my personality is. But, I guess I just try to absorb as much as possible and just be the best version of myself every single day. And hopefully that comes more second nature than not.
Okay, you don't lose your temper, but you do have some good one-liners, though, I have to say, because
I don't even
you are
remember them.
very funny. I know you don't remember them, but you're like you're very funny, like in
Well,
a
coming from
subtle.
a comedian, I greatly
Well,
appreciate it and
well,
take it. I
thank you.
know
Yeah,
I know my sense of humor is dry, and I can definitely be silly. And when the camera's off and I can let loose, then absolutely, there's certainly some personality in here that I guess the people in my inner circle and close to me
yeah,
know
they get to
all too
see.
well. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Where do you see real estate going in LA in terms of design? Because I know you work with a lot of developers. That's one of your niches. Is you tapped into that, at the
yeah.
start of your career. Where do you see it going? Like,
LA is interesting. LA is obviously a very design forward city, and it's a world city. And I think there's influence from all over the place that ultimately end up in these world markets. And I compare that to what I see in Miami, which is my hometown. And I love what's happening in Miami. It's a true renaissance, and that's a market that I think was undervalued for a long time. But from the design and style point of view, I actually think LA has a major leg up still than what I'm seeing in Miami. Miami is still very much about very modern, contemporary, flashy, shiny finishes, a little bit more pomp and circumstance. And I think for Los Angeles, what I've noticed a lot, at least in the design world and the developer world, those builders and designers that take their craft very seriously are really leaning more towards that organic ethos in terms of the materials they use and choose. So I think the trend we've been seeing a lot nowadays, and I'm sure you'd probably agree with me, is a lot of travertines and a lot of limestones and a lot of muted earthy finishes and plaster on the walls and boucle couches and things with a lot of texture that are essentially timeless is really the best way I can describe it. It's the type of property that you'll buy today and 20 years from now will still be appreciated and look amazing and potentially
mm-hmm.
resell for more the second time around. And something I've noticed, at least here in LA, is these super shiny, flashy, modern homes, these kind of quote unquote McMansions. Yeah, they're beautiful from the jump, but as time goes on,
Yeah,
they
they.
lose something, a little bit of luster. And unfortunately, they don't make the best investments because when you go to resell them the second time around, they tend to sell for less. So I always look for styles that I feel like are timeless, whether it's more traditional or Mediterranean with some transitional flair. But I'm really loving seeing a lot of these more natural elements in homes nowadays. And when you walk into a home, there's form and function, and ideally you want to have both. You don't want to have
Mm-hmm.
beautiful design and a home that's not livable. And I think the trend today, especially as we have more women developers in the market, because I think they
Are
have a
you
much
seeing
better eye.
more women developers now? Or
Yeah, developers and designers who have made a real imprint. And I think the way they look at a house and the way the house is lived in, they have obviously a woman's perspective and more of a family perspective. And I think a lot of male developers oftentimes miss that, um, for better or worse, for whatever reason. And
mm-hmm.
it just seems like it's taking the whole industry in a much more positive direction. And it's definitely a direction I'm very proud of.
I mean, you've had like some gorgeous listings even since I've been here. But your developer who did um, Lucerne, that house is gorgeous. Arden's beautiful. Your newest
Yeah.
listing.
Arden is the
Uh,
perfect example of what I was just talking about. It's not the most expensive listing in LA. I mean, obviously, we have properties here
mm-hmm.
that are north of $100 million. But for $5 million, which is still, I get it, a monumental amount of money for most people, especially in this country outside of these major cities like Los Angeles, what you get for that location is tremendous. And you're talking about, again, beautiful materials like unfilled travertine and French oak and white oak and chevron patterns and
The floors
just
are gorgeous. They were like real wood, oak, chevron.
yep,
And then I wanted to run my arms my against the wall, and then the pool. I mean, the whole thing. You just walk in and you go, and you haven't seen it really in LA. And that's what I love about real estate. Like, there's so many different things you can see. It could be a condo or whatever, but like, you walk in, it's something new, and you get excited all over again.
that's why
And
I think it's one of the greatest jobs in the world. We get to spend our days literally walking on some of the most beautiful, thoughtful design homes and properties that most people will never have the privilege of being inside of. And it's kind of pinch me moments sometimes when you walk
mm-hmm,
these properties or when you have the privilege of selling them. But ultimately it's inspiring, and you see kind of the thought process that a lot of really creative people go through. And it's always inspired me to try not just to do my job better and be more creative, but
mm-hmm.
ultimately to get into that side of the business. And I think one of the best parts about being a real estate broker is it's kind of like legal insider trading, right? Like we get access to
Right.
some of the best deals before the general populace ever gets to see them. And, if development is something that, you have kind of a passion for, it's in your blood, then why not take advantage of it and go out and do it yourself and kind of make your own future. And I've started doing that. And it's just been a real, tremendous asset, not just to be able to speak that language of development, but to go through the process to really understand it in a way that I can speak to the clients in that language because I've been through it myself. And it only helps to further cultivate that sense of, people like to work with, people they know, like, and trust. And,
Right.
the more, I guess, guidance you can provide through that process, and literally taking someone's hand and walking them from, the genesis of buying the property through completion and selling it on the other side is really rewarding. And knowing that you had a hand in ultimately what
Right.
becomes a very meaningful transaction in someone's life, especially when it's from the beginning like that.
I know you've done a home on Sunset Plaza but is that where you would like your future to go, is in development?
I don't
Do you
know.
see that?
I think about it a lot. Obviously, I'm kind of, in the midst of,
Mm-hmm.
the market here, and I try to do good business as much as possible. But ultimately, I'd love to have ancillary businesses that, obviously help to sustain a certain lifestyle. And I started in developments around 2014, 2 years after I got into the business. And that was ultimately my tool to make a name for myself in this industry.
Right.
And it was, again, just my way of working smarter. Every mom and pop maybe sells a house once every 10 or 15 years. And to go knock on every door and cold call a bunch of people that I didn't know just didn't seem like a great use of my time. So I decided to go after developers, and they didn't care where I was from or who I was friends with. They just cared about access to good deals. But at the beginning, I didn't know what a good deal was. So I had to learn from their lens how to underwrite a deal and kind of, work backwards and figure out if somebody's going to buy a property for this much and it's going to cost this much to build and this much to finance and you have this much in closing costs, ultimately how much is left if I can put together a fair assessment of what the resale value is. And in doing that, I was able to start transacting over and over again because, good
And
developers.
how did you learn that? Did you go to someone that you trusted, or like how did you put that together? Like,
Mostly self-taught and
okay.
asking a lot of questions of people that were in this industry. My brother was just kind of going through it at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. So we learned a lot together and kind of cut our teeth together. And as trite as it sounds, there's resources all over the place. Websites,
Right.
YouTube. I'm an avid YouTube watcher, even to this day. When I'm climbing into bed at night and putting something on, it's typically something that I'm going to learn from, as opposed to just binge watching a show on Netflix, which I still do from
Totally.
time to
Yeah.
time. But there's resources and access to things all over the place if you have a little bit of ingenuity and can figure out where to look, and it's all out there.
Right. It's true. Very true. I mean,
And then ultimately just doing it, so in 14, I was lucky enough to link up with some developers who took a liking to me for whatever reason and allowed me to
I
really
wonder why someone would like you, Adam. I mean, it's probably really hard to like Adam, but
Stamie, I speak sarcasm, so I'm picking up what you're putting down. But with them, they let me lead the process, not just in terms of, okay, you're the agent, go find the property, and
Right.
once I'm done, you're going to sell it.
Right.
It was like, all right, how do you see this? What's your vision here? I want you in the meetings with the architects, with the contractors, with the
Right.
engineers, with the city. And there's nothing really that comes close to just having experience. I went to law school. I don't really know how to be a lawyer. You can sit and take a real
But
estate
you know how to
exam.
talk. You know how to talk. Did they
Yeah.
teach you that in law school?
No, I don't think so. I think that was just kind of part of my nature and just understanding how I like to be spoken to and living by the golden rule. And
Right.
I think in any industry, especially in business, communication is key. And you can never really over communicate, but you can certainly under communicate. So I think it's just learning what makes people tick. And ultimately, we wear many hats, and sometimes you have to be a therapist, and sometimes you have to be an attorney, and a very specialized type of attorney, which is what I really think real estate agents are, whether they know it or not. And when you understand, what makes each client uniquely different, and if there's a way to just connect to them in some way, whatever that is, you're just looking for common ground. And once that connection is made, the rest becomes easy. But there's no greater skill in real estate than being likable.
True that.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true.
And maybe in life.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm going to work on that quality.
You're doing just fine. You're not somebody I ever worry about, Stamie. I can promise you that.
I have a few questions from your social media that I wanted I'm going to get to, but I have a few other questions before that. What is your largest deal where you like put it into escrow and then you walked out of the door and went, holy shit, I just put that house into escrow?
I've had a few. I'm really
Okay.
fortunate to say
Yeah.
that. The largest deal of my career was 90 million.
Wow.
That was a really tough deal. It took 5 months, and I might have lost a year or two of my life on that one. There was a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And, cashing the check is one thing. For me, I really wanted that feather in my cap. It was just such a challenge, and it was such a monumental number. And at the time, it was one of the biggest sales in the history of Los Angeles. And,
Wow. Yeah.
just knowing that kind of I would have that check mark next to my name forever was
Mm-hmm.
was meaningful, ego or not. It's just something I really wanted, and was really proud when that closed. And then I've had a lot of heartbreaks. Last year I had a deal in contract that was 58 million, but I had both sides of the deal doing this with John,
Wow. Yeah.
which obviously a lot riding on that. And we got 5 months into that deal, and the buyer ultimately released $3 million of earnest money and then some. And we felt pretty good at that point because nobody walks away from
Right.
$3 million. And they did. Buyer was ultimately put on a very specific list in China, which essentially froze him from moving any more money from mainland China to the
Oh,
United States. And they had no choice but to walk away. And that was devastating. And that's the nature of real estate. You go into every deal never knowing if it's going to close or not. Ultimately, we only get paid when a deal closes. And when they don't, it can really hurt, especially when you put 5 months of your time and energy into something
right.
and you have nothing to show for it. But that's the business. And then be
No,
the break sometimes, and you give yourself a day to sulk about it, and then you kind of say 1 2 3 over it, and then you got to move on to the next.
you definitely have to have a bounce back, a fast, fast bounce back.
Hmm.
Like when you lose in a game, you got to be able to get back up because this business will eat you up and spit you out. And those deals, it's interesting because I love when you have like an easier deal. So say you have a deal that they see if one or two houses and then they close and was easier than normal deals. And they go, wow, I'm like your easiest client. Like, like
Yeah,
this was a breeze. And then you think, yeah, because I've been like tortured for the last like 7 months with every other deal, so it kind of balances out.
it
Um,
does.
what I find the bigger deals, because a lot of people are like, it's the same job but a bigger deal. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, the stress you carry on a larger price property, I feel, is a lot heavier than on like a $1 million home or a $3 million home.
Yeah,
Uh,
it can be. I think it's the stress you put on yourself. Ultimately, clients are clients, right? And it's funny. John always says this: the worst of people comes out in times of war and in times of buying and selling real estate, and it is so true. As cliche as it is, the larger deals, obviously, there's a lot more riding on the line, but the job really is the same. And I can tell you, for every $1 million deal versus any 20 or $30 million deal I've done, the amount of work involved isn't that drastically different. So it was a conscientious choice that I made
mhm,
relatively early on to want to focus on the upper end of the spectrum. There's a lot more volume on the small side, and
mhm,
not to say I turn away smaller deals. I'm obviously super happy to service those too, because it's all about relationships, and you never know where the
right.
next lead or client is going to come from. But ultimately, if you're going to do the same amount of work, you might as well make as much as you can out of it. And that's why I obviously love the high end, in addition to just the magnitude of these properties, and how uniquely special some of them are.
And then do you show a high end property the same way you would show a $2 million property?
I do. Yeah. The
Okay.
process for me is very similar. Obviously, it depends if I'm on the sell side or the buy side.
Mm-hmm.
I like to be hands on in a showing, but I always offer the client the option, because every client is different, and some clients would really rather just be left to their own devices to walk through in their own time without having somebody hover over them. There's only so many different ways I can say this is the kitchen and this is the bathroom, and to me, that's not what the job is about. If I'm doing my job effectively representing a seller, it's about marketing effectively and getting as many people through the door as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
The person who really has to do, I guess, the job of selling and advising in that specific scenario is the one representing the buyer. I don't have access to the buyer for more than 30 minutes. There's nothing I'm really going to say in the midst of that showing that's
Right.
going to sway them one way or another. All I'm trying to do is to create the best experience for them possible. And that goes back to being respectful, being likable, checking your ego at the door. And, ultimately, that's the one aspect of the job that feels like it's a little more retail, where you're providing
Mm-hmm.
this white gloved experience.
Right.
But other than that, it's a lot of putting out fires, obviously dealing with issues which come up on a daily basis. For us, it's not just handling our own issues and our own deals, but getting involved in the deals for other agents on the team, and being a backstop for them when
Mm-hmm.
situations come up that they don't know how to handle. And that just comes with experience. And it's one of my favorite aspects of this job is the mentorship and being able to pay it forward, and having a great group of agents, at GRG that I get to really work hands-on with, especially when
Right.
needed. And it's nice to be needed, let's be honest.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Mhm.
What do you think the biggest reason a property doesn't sell?
Overpriced.
Yeah. Okay.
More often than not, that's really the main issue that we run into. There's no more effective marketing strategy than pricing a property appropriately, and that's usually within 5 to 10% of what the true value
Mm-hmm.
is. And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint the true value, but almost every seller thinks their house is the greatest house ever
Right.
built, and there's such a large emotional component to this. And what you tend to see happen more often than not when a property is priced too high, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, Amy,
Mm-hmm.
is you chase the market down.
Yep.
And if you chase the market down, it obviously takes a lot longer. You're going to accrue carrying costs, and then you ultimately sell it for less because psychologically, every buyer's thinking this property's been on the market for 7 months. It hasn't sold. There's something wrong with it. There's obviously some
Right.
kind of flaw. What don't I know about that has created an issue here, or it's just massively overpriced?
I mean, they even do that here if it's 30 days. Like I had a client who was like, "Oh, it's been on the market 21 days. I'm going to offer 200,000 less." I was like, "No, no, no, no,
Yeah,
no."
yeah.
I go, let's discuss this a little longer. Yeah, even if you
It's
market it, it's just not, you know, it doesn't matter if it's overpriced.
it's
Uh,
scary. I think the houses that tend to have the best results do the opposite. And I think that is a very tough conversation to have with clients. They can't understand the nature of underpricing a property and then bidding it up. It doesn't work so well on a $50 million property,
no,
but like
right.
on the bread and butter deals, like 1 to 3 million bucks, especially when the market's hot. The the biggest service you can do for yourself is really studying the comps and understand that in Los Angeles, no two comps are going to be the same. There are obviously unique
Right.
things about every specific property. But if you can hone in on, what the 80th percentile is of what the value of that home is and price it there, you're going to sell it
Mm-hmm.
a lot faster. You're probably going to get more money, and it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience versus just going on this sludge of a marathon and having a race to the bottom.
Yeah, I think the psychology, because the sellers always think I'm going to lose money if I underprice it, and you're like, no, 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 that's not what's going to happen. You're going to push the price up, and inevitably, you choose when you want to sell it at that price. But
That's it. Yep.
it's a whole thing. All right, let me get to my low questions. All right,
Sure.
is the 90 million deal your most memorable deal, or is there another deal that?
I've had a lot of memorable deals. If I'm ever fortunate enough to get to the point where I can look back in my career and write a book that nobody will read about the most challenging deals
Okay.
that I've had, there's a few chapters in there that I'll look back on and laugh. There's no question.
Do you remember your deals? Because I don't remember most of my. I mean, like I would have to like really sit down. They leave my head.
Some, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
I don't have the greatest memory when it comes to like
Okay.
attention to detail in every deal,
Yeah.
but there are definitely some. I think I remember people more than the deals themselves, and
Okay.
the way people carry themselves and the stories that come from just the very uniquely different personalities that exist in a city like this. Because Los Angeles is like, honestly, it's one of the most eccentric and eclectic cities I've ever had the privilege of living in or visiting. You get all walks of life here,
Mm-hmm.
and it just attracts some really interesting people. Anytime you have a city based around Hollywood and the entertainment industry, you're
It's
going to get a bunch of
eccentric
characters.
people. Yep.
Very much
Uh,
so.
have you ever knocked on a door and someone answered it naked?
Yeah, I have. I actually have, and this was not from door. I've never been a big door knocker. I'm not a prolific
Yeah.
door knocker or cold caller. I had a deal I did. This would make the book. Uh,
Chapter
I
one.
had a deal I did in 2021. It was a $43 million deal, big deal, and that was another deal where I had the buyer and the seller, so a lot on the line. And I had never met the seller before. I had reached out to him just to explain that I had this buyer. I knew the house was built and available. And he invited me to his house to come and have a conversation. And he lived up in the Hollywood Hills. And when he answered the door, he answered it butt ass naked. And there was a woman behind him, also sans clothing, except she had big bunny ears on and she was prancing around the kitchen.
So it was
And
Easter.
so it was, every day is Easter in Los
Okay.
Angeles, Stamie. There were some other extracurriculars going on for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, which was ridiculous, but that is not so unusual in a city like this. It does happen.
So when you sat down to talk to this person, did they put pants on?
No, they put a robe on.
A
So
robe. Okay.
no pants were worn at any time by anybody other than myself.
Okay. And then did she just sit there with a robe or no robe?
No, she disappeared. At a
She
certain point,
disappeared.
it was just myself, the other gentleman who I was having the conversation with
Okay.
at his kitchen table, and some mound of substance that was just sitting in front of him.
Oh my God. So she's like,
Yeah,
I'm just going to take my bunny ears and hop over there. That's
went into
amazing.
another room and never saw her again. Wouldn't even know who she was or been able to pick her out of lineup just because her face was covered with a mask.
Amazing. Do you
Mhm.
have a favorite celebrity story in Los Angeles? Doesn't have to be like you ran into them at a coffee shop, real estate, anything like a car
Yeah,
wash, like a
I, I,
fun.
I do actually. So I've been really fortunate in that I've had the privilege of working with a lot of very high profile people, and it started before my days in real estate. When I was in law school, I was a bartender back in South Beach, where I was living at the time, and I'll make the story full circle. But the coolest experience I had in that job was actually with Dave Grohl,
Oh,
former
yeah.
drummer of Nirvana and obviously lead singer of the Foo Fighters and drummer of Kings of the Stone Age. The guy's incredible and
Yep.
arguably one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. He walked up to the bar, ordered 3 Crown and Cokes. I obviously made the drinks. I put them on the bar. He went to pay, and I said, "Mr. Grohl, out of respect, these are on me. You've been a huge inspiration, and I love everything you do. And this is the least I can do. And just want
So
you to know,
cool.
I'm grateful." And he smiled at me. He took a bow, took a couple $100 out of his pocket, and threw it on the bar. And I thought that was so sweet.
Very sweet.
8, 9 years later, I'm sitting at lunch with a good friend of mine who happens to be a celebrity, kind of high profile. And she had actually asked me the question, this same question, like, what was the best experience you've ever had with a celebrity? And I tell her this Dave Grohl story, and I get up and run to the restroom for a second. And when I come back to the table, I see she's on FaceTime,
Oh,
and she has Dave Grohl on the phone, and she
that's
tells him this story, and she turns the camera towards me, and I'm like, "Yo, what's up?" And he goes, "Holy shit, I totally remember dropping a couple $100 on that guy. Fucking incredible."
that.
And like, it just like was such
Oh,
a
that's
very
really
cool
cool.
pinch
Yeah.
me type moment. And he was so gracious then and so gracious when I met him 10 years ago. And it's really nice to see that, even people with that level of success
Mm-hmm.
can stay grounded and obviously understand what the important things are in life and be so focused and committed to relationships and their fans, and just the way they see the world, is really cool, because it would be so easy for someone like him to go the other direction.
And he's extra special, and that he remembered is great. My older son went to school with his daughters,
Mm.
and he said they're lovely. Like he loved them.
Yeah, I
Uh,
hear the same things
yeah,
about him all the time.
that's really cool.
There's a
Yeah,
few people in that industry where obviously you hear a lot of horror stories, but there's a lot of really amazing people in
right.
every industry here in every walk of life. And when you find the good ones, you got to really hang on tight.
Yeah. All right, here are my questions.
All right, let's do it.
How did you meet John?
I met John roughly 11 years ago or 10 years ago. I actually had an open house. It was one of my first larger listings. I think it was like a $16 million property in Beverly Hills. And I had known of John just because we
Mm.
were of, I guess, similar generation and coming up together at the same time in the business. And he came to the house and introduced himself. And I was like, "Oh, I know who you are, man. It's so nice to meet you. I've been looking forward to this, actually." And, immediately it was like kind of instant chemistry. And we just slowly started to build a friendship. And ultimately it led to where we are today.
Very cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love John and his eyebrows, and his hair, and the way he speaks. He's the best.
He
Uh,
is a wickedly smart guy.
he
I
is. I
honestly
love
don't
hearing him
have enough
speak.
things. John's incredible, man. A lot of people don't know this about John, but John didn't go to college. John is a fifth generation Angelino, and he just has this entrepreneurial spirit. And more often than not, whether he will say it or not, he's the smartest guy in the room. And he is so articulate and so well spoken and so well read and researched, but more than anything, well prepared. He really takes every meeting seriously, like it's homework for his
Mm-hmm.
honors science class the next day, and he gives it 100% all the time. And it's rare for me in my life to find people that have a similar work ethic, but I think John blows mine out of the water. He's truly incredible.
I see John in politics. Every time he speaks in the meetings, I'm
Me
always
too.
like,
I told him he missed his calling. He should absolutely be like mayor of Los
he
Angeles or
still
run for
has
city
time.
council. He has plenty of time. I just don't think it's something that he has the ambition for.
Right. The only negative thing about John that I can say is that he went to the Eagles Super Bowl and he was
Hmm.
a Patriots fan. because
He's a
it
big
was,
Patriots fan, but he has good reason. John's uncle was the
yes.
offensive line coach for the Patriots for like 30 plus years.
Is blood a good reason to not support the Eagles? Is it?
Fair,
I don't think
fair,
so.
fair enough, Stamie. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Your beautiful puppy, Sophia.
Hmm.
Are you a Chihuahua lover forever, or
I am
was that
now.
just, yeah? Okay.
It wasn't intended. It's not the dog I would have picked. Like it's not like I went to the shelter and I was like, "Yep, I'll take that
I'll take the
2 pound
tiniest dog
thing
you
with no
have that.
teeth." It was not not something that was intended. It's just something that happens. Just speaking about relationships, just in a past relationship, and there was like an immediate connection with this strange little creature who inherently likes nothing and nobody. So the fact that she showed me any kind of attention or love was kind of
Yeah.
took me aback. And that was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and we've been kind of inseparable ever since. And I think I'll probably have a Chihuahua forever because she sets such a
Yeah.
good example of like what that unconditional love is. And I've always heard about this between man and dog, and I've certainly had this experience with other pets. But the
Mm-hmm.
connection I have with her for some reason is profoundly and uniquely special for me.
Oh, yeah. She loves her daddy. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, she's
could you?
doggedly loyal. No pun
She
intended.
really is. I mean,
Yeah.
crazy. Could you ever date someone named after your dog?
Um,
I mean, now you're in a relationship, so I mean, but when they were trying to like, you know, do a, love
so
story with Sophia, I was like, how can you date someone named after your dog?
it's funny you asked that because in my past, I have dated Sophia's.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one or two, um, maybe more. I hadn't thought about it to answer the question. I don't think it's going to matter because I don't see myself dating
No, you
anybody
have
new
no.
anytime soon, if not ever.
You're done now. You're done. That's good.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who
game
is
over.
your favorite person on Buying Beverly Hills? And listen, no one listens to this podcast except like a few hundred people, so you're safe to answer that question.
That's a good question. All right, so obviously John aside, and
Yeah.
anybody GRG related aside, I have a lot of love for that whole cast. However, it'd be really hard to pick one, but just off the top of my head, the person that I really enjoy spending time with is Zach. Um, for those that know Zach or don't know Zach, he obviously is portrayed as kind of the class clown on the show, and that's genuinely who he is in real life. He is big, warm-hearted, affable, just super likable, incredibly sharp, but just funny. The guy just
Yeah.
genuinely makes me laugh and has this real sense of care and compassion in him that I can certainly appreciate. And he's just such a likable guy. And for me, he is exactly the type of humor that I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate. So I always enjoy the moments I get to spend with him. No question.
There's people that have humor where they use their humor to bring people together. Like they'll walk in a room and like they want to make everyone feel warm and fuzzy, and that's his humor. And of course, he's closest. He makes fun of Ben because they're real super close.
Well,
But
they're the same person in so many ways.
yeah, exactly. But in general, his humor brings everyone together because everyone loves to laugh. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's one thing about people, it's like they don't laugh a lot like adults. They need to laugh more because life gets way too serious. There's like
Yeah.
so much
And
shit we deal with.
he's one of the most liked people in our industry, and I think coming to our company was a really formative moment for him. Zach, as is kind of discussed in the show, came from Hilton Highland, which was an incredible company.
Mm-hmm.
I say was, it still is. And he had been there for many years, but that's an environment that is very buttoned up, and there were certain processes there and things you could or could not do. And I think it was really difficult for someone like Zach to really showcase his true personality. And I think the same could be said about a lot of companies, especially ones that are run a little more
Mm-hmm.
corporately. And I think the fact that the agency is such a familial, boutique dynamic really kind of opened up the horizons for him to really let his personality shine and to be the best version of himself. And if you look at, his career numbers and the deals he's done, he's had some tremendous ones, but his business has been unbelievable since joining the company. He's really taken off and has really entered that upper echelon or upper stratosphere of top producer in Los Angeles.
Yeah, he like owns who he is. Like he's present in his body. Like he's
Yep.
very comfortable. Yeah,
And
it's really
unapologetic about it.
yeah, it's really.
Sometimes a little too comfortable.
But once you go there, there's no coming back. Like
There's no coming
you
back.
can't.
Yeah.
So reality show season 3. What do you think?
I fucking hope so.
Oh, nice. Okay. Have you guys heard anything or?
I haven't heard a
Okay.
thing. I think it's done well. You know, it was
Yeah.
in the top 10 for a few weeks. The feedback that I've gotten, at least just from the random people all over the world that have
Yeah.
reached out, have been nothing short of positive. Everyone's been awesome. It's really funny to go and read the comments on, the internet and Instagram, specifically on Twitter and Reddit and on these
When you
message
read the
boards. And
Reddit stuff was so funny when we were at that open house and you were like, I read the comments on Reddit and you started reading them out loud. It was
that's
awesome.
the best. And honestly, the really mean stuff is some of the funniest
Yes.
stuff. And you have to have, I guess, some thick skin to put yourself out there and to be on TV. And obviously, there's a lot of pluses that come with it, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of crazy stuff too. It's just the
Yeah.
exposure and becoming a more recognizable person and walking the streets and meeting people that feel like they know you. And obviously, you wanting to know them a little bit. And,
Mm-hmm.
obviously wanting to make sure that, you're always representing yourself and your company to the best of your ability. And it's just been a real blessing. And I never thought that this would be my life, but here I am.
Right.
And after having done it and having had so much fun with it and seeing what the end result was, I would 100% do it again in a heartbeat if
Well,
the
you were
opportunity
really
comes.
true to yourself. I mean, you were awesome on the show. Like you came across great. It was
I appreciate it.
fantastic. Yeah.
It was interesting to watch because so much of what we filmed wasn't on there.
I know you're like, I don't know. There's no real estate on this show. And then I watched it and I'm like, what is Adam talking?
Well, I mean, there were other storylines for us that were, really centerfold, at least in terms of our existence on the show, which we thought would get a lot of coverage that didn't make
Mhm.
the show at all. So interestingly, I think, for John and I, I think we're, maybe more portrayed as more kind of background as opposed to, in front of the camera at all
Right.
times. We were more secondary. And I kind of like that because it allowed us in many situations to be the adults in the room and really come
Right.
across as the professionals that I see that we are, while still having a great balance of work and fun. And, I have no qualms with how it was portrayed. I do feel like it was true to myself. Obviously, they put me in some funny situations, but somebody gave me a good note before I started filming, which was, if you don't be an asshole, they can't make you look like an asshole. And to a large degree, that's kind of true. But even though it's unscripted and it's reality, obviously shows like this are hyper produced and you're put into, some situations that you'd rather not
Mhm.
be in. And it's figuring out how to be a gentleman in all situations
Right.
and to, manage the expectations, not just of yourself, but of your peers and contemporaries, and then ultimately the audience, and still wanting to deliver a great show while, not, selling yourself out for the sake of making a great show.
Right. And the editing, I mean, they worked in your I mean, everything you did was true to your character. So you're being true to yourself. They can't edit that into a different personality.
They can try. It's going to be really tough.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Um,
Yep.
okay. So would you ever do a crossover with Selling Sunset?
Um, I mean, I guess I kind of already did, right?
Yeah, you did in
Season
the
one of
first.
Selling Sunset.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, depending on what the context of that was
Yeah.
and which production
I know
team was behind the filming. If it was buying Beverly Hills production, then hell yeah, would love
it's
to.
not real. I don't think it's real. I mean, that's a hard crossover. I mean, unless you
Yeah,
want all the blondes to come over to one of your listings on
sure.
that.
I love when Jason comes. Jason's a good
No,
guy.
yeah, Jason's, yeah. And so someone was, who does your social media? Someone asked. I did not put that there. That was a question in your Instagram.
For the four people that care, my Instagram is managed by the one and only Stamie. Stamie has been a blessing when it comes to my social presence. I
Thank you very
have
much.
very little interest in my social media. I love to look at it. I hate to post.
But you answer
Um,
every message yourself. Like I do the story stuff. The office
yeah,
does the posts.
my responsibility is to engage and to actually talk to people who take the time to actually take a few minutes out of the day to say something thoughtful.
And
And
you enjoy that, yeah.
I do,
Yeah, it's
especially
really cool.
if it's respectful engagement and somebody really is thoughtful in the message they want to deliver. Then I would be an asshat to not take some time to respond, and that's something that I really value.
You'd be surprised how many people don't respond.
No, I'm not surprised. I expect
Yeah,
that, and
yeah.
even with that, it's so funny. Like I'm still learning all this. I didn't know. Nikki just pointed this out to me a couple weeks ago. There's that like other folder where there are these like other messages that you, and I opened it up 2 weeks ago, and there were thousands of messages, and it took me hours to try to sift through it, and I didn't want to feel like I was letting anybody down. It's, I guess, the people pleaser in me, but it just feels like the nice, respectful thing to do when somebody puts in a
Yeah.
little bit of effort to say something nice.
So back when we did the show, it was just general messages, but it's hidden messages. So I found the folder you're talking about. 10 years after our show aired.
Oh
So
my
then,
God.
so 8 years. And then I answered everyone and they're like, oh, thanks so much for answering me 8 years later. And I'm
Right.
like, I'm so sorry. I never saw your message.
Yeah.
Cause I feel the same way as you do. If someone's going to send me a message, I'm going to like engage. I don't,
Yeah.
cause
We're
they're
just
taking their
finding the
time.
time to do it.
Yeah,
Like we all have
exactly.
lives and family and significant others and obviously careers and businesses that we have to tend to every day. And by the time you know it, there's not enough hours in the day and it gets eaten up. So you have to really make a concerted effort to carve time out to go do things like that.
Yeah,
And
right.
ultimately it's important.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
By
Do
the way,
you,
great job with my Instagram, Stamie. Really,
thank
like
you.
I feel
Well,
like the content game has been nothing short of spectacular over the last couple months, and I
I
owe that all to
feel
you.
like you are a great person to do that for because you are a lot of fun. And I think I got a good grasp on your sense of humor now. And
Well, I'm a
there's
lot
more
of
to
fun
come.
because you're a lot of fun, and I have a lot of fun just hanging with you. And if just hanging with you leads to great content, then I'm all for it.
Well, then great. So that's perfect. We're going to play pickleball. I'm going to record that.
Yep.
Stamie is not a calm person. I might throw the ball here and there if I lose. But you know what?
That has not been my experience of Stamie. My experience of
No.
Stamie has been the absolute antithesis of that. I always find that you are thoughtful, hyper respectful, cool, calm, and collected. But more than anything, you're the coolest motherfucker I've ever had the privilege of knowing. Excuse my language.
Oh, that's
And
very kind. Thank
there's
you.
not enough time in the day for me to spend time with you. And you've been a major asset in my life, and I can only hope that I can return the favor.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're definitely a gift in my life, and I'm very grateful to have you. And definitely one of my highlights in 24 for sure. Like, I mean, I made a big transition. I left the company I was with for a very long time that I liked, and I'm very, it was a hard decision to make, but I'm so happy I met you. Like
Well,
seriously.
I hope you landed in a place you love, and all I can say to this love affair is I love you more.
Oh, I love you. Well, I mean, like, how do I not end on that, you guys? Um, to be clear, there's more than a few hundred listeners. But anyway, I digress. Do you have a favorite quote?
It's gonna sound silly, but honestly, it's just where there's a will, there's a way. I really
Okay.
believe in that, and at least in the experience of my life, crazy things happen, and sometimes for a reason. But anything that I've really put my mind to in the course of my life, and I've been hyper focused and dedicated, and no is not an option, and failure is not an option. It's amazing what can happen.
I got to say, and especially with this job, I mean, I've seen some of the craziest stuff happen. The way I've ended up in LA, like, I do believe in that. Uh, and you have to be open minded to believe in that. And miracles do happen. Like, you can make stuff happen, even if you think you're stuck somewhere and change is really good. It's scary, but you got to make a move. If you don't make a move, nothing's going to change.
I'm with you. I'm not the most spiritual guy. I tend to be more agnostic, but there have been, a few circumstances in my life where everything looked like chaos. And when you look back, the pieces all fall into place in this magnificent, almost designed type of way. And whatever that is, I don't really care. It's all part of my experience, and I'm just happy to be living it and to be present here and to be obviously talking to you and having these types of moments and experiences, and always just looking forward to see what comes tomorrow.
Well, that I think is going to wrap this show up. I'm going to take a little picture right here, a little teaser. Adam, this was so much fun. Thank you so much.
Pleasure
Guys.
is always mine. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to link Adam where you can follow him. And please watch Buying Beverly Hills Season 2. Follow the agency. And thanks again for listening, and heart you. Here's a heart. Isn't that
Much
what
love.
old people do? Or what do young people do? Oh, that one.
Something
There you go.
like
That one. Oh, look what it does now. Wow. Modern technology. I think, does the thumb do the thumb now?
I don't know.
Oh,
You
no,
go
just
first.
the hearts. I don't even do the heart right. Damn, I failed
Apparently
everyone.
not.
Okay, well, have a good night. Thanks, Adam. Okay, love
All
you.
right,
See you
Stamie. Love you.
later.
Talk
See
to
you
you later.
later.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.